In one corner, the brutal brawlers of the Badland, muscle-bound raiders born for bloodshed, the orcs. And in the other corner, the cold-blooded commanders of the goblinoid legions, strategic, disciplined, and deadly in formation, the hobgoblins. Welcome back to Beast Battle, everybody. The show where we pit two classic monsters against each other to see who comes out on top, and more importantly, to see when and where you would use them in your campaign. So let's break down the numbers. With the legacy editions of Orc and Hobgoblin in the 2014 Monster Manual, unfortunately, we can't use the 2024 or 2025 Monster Manual because orcs don't actually appear in there, unfortunately. So we're going Legacy Edition with this one. But when it comes to orcs, this beast hits hard. Strength 16, health 15, and its trademark aggressive trait lets it close the distance very quick, using a bonus action to move its speed. As long as it's towards an enemy, that is. It's also swinging around a great axe for a mean 1d12 damage. And if you're thinking you're safe from long range, well, think again, because it's got a whole quiver of javelins just waiting to make you look like a porcupine. However, they do have relatively low AC, with it sitting around like 13, but for what they lack in defense, they make up for with raw power. You can expect a brutal and reckless charge that kind of puts the players off balance. Now, comparing this to the Hobgoblin, a more disciplined soldier of the goblinoid world, we're sitting at an AC of 18. That's right, chainmail and shield. The Hobgoblin may not hit as hard, but it's way harder to hit, and some might argue that's better. It will swing a long sword in melee range, but it has a long bow, and that thing can go at a distance, long range, of 600 feet. I don't think we're escaping from this one. And the ability for a Hobgoblin is actually martial advantage. Once per turn, it deals an extra 2d6 damage if an ally is within 5 feet. So it's kind of like pack tactics. This makes them devastating when working in formations, but luckily for our orc, it doesn't matter in a 1v1. Bottom line, the orc is going to be your chaotic frontliner, and then the Hobgoblin is going to be a disciplined tactician. But before we throw them in a ring and pit them against each other, let's talk about the real world lore that brought these things to fruition. Didn't just pop out of a dungeon master's brain one day. The word hobgoblin comes from English folklore. The word hob was a friendly household spirit, kind of like a helpful brownie or fairy, while goblin meant something a little bit trickier and mischievous. Put them together and you've got a creature that's a little bit more mischievous than monstrous. And even Shakespeare referenced a hobgoblin in his play A Midsummer Night's Dream. None other than Puck, the hobgoblin himself. But over the centuries, especially thanks to Tolkien's influence, hobgoblins evolved into the disciplined martial villains we have today. Orcs, meanwhile, trace their name back to Orcus, the Roman god of the underworld. Or, in Beowulf, we find the term Orcenius, referring to evil spirits or corrupted beings. But once again, it was Tolkien who truly forged the orc in a brutal archetype. Twisted, violent, and bred for war. In early folklore, orcs and hobgoblins were interchangeable. But in modern fantasy, they've taken wildly different paths. And a fun little fact about these two creatures, both of them were present in the very first Dungeons & Dragons in 1974. But since we're talking about Dungeons & Dragons, let's get into the lore. Hobgoblins and orcs represent two very different philosophies of war. Hobgoblins happen to be these iron-willed champions of order, followers of Maglu Bayet, someone we've referenced previously, the lawful evil god of conquest, who demands absolute discipline and views life as a battlefield that only the strongest survive. Their society reflects this belief, with it being a strict militaristic hierarchy. From lowly smiths to dedicated generals, the world is that of legion. Over the editions, hobgoblins have eventually graduated into these legion builders rather than just being an upgraded version of a goblin. But when we want to talk about orcs, they embody unrelenting force and raw power. They worship Grumash One-Eye, a savage war god blinded by the elven deity. And within the pantheon, there's a glorification of strength, bloodshed, and dominance. Orc tribes end up being ruled by the strongest, a leader proven by combat. They are nomadic raiders, not necessarily staying in one spot, and often seen as dumb brutes. However, deeper lore from 3rd edition and onward has really tried to flesh out the orc archetype. Orcs have grown beyond these pig-faced fodder. In 5th edition, there's so much more nuance, they've even become playable characters. The orcs are trying to prove they're not just stat blocks. Their personalities, cultures, ideologies brought to life at the table, and here's how you roleplay them. Hobgoblins, tailor-made for military campaigns and war-torn intrigue. Think politically savvy, disciplined warlords, playing the long game. They will operate with like a very rigid code of honor. Violate that and it's exile or execution. And the thing that would make them really fun to roleplay is they respect strength even in their enemies, which would open the door to rivalry, negotiation, and uneasy alliances. And for their voice, keep it precise and calculated, like every word is marching forward. Orcs, on the other hand, wild card. Perfect for raw emotional storylines too. They're the classic villains, sure, but they can shine even brighter as reluctant allies or tragic figures caught in between instinct and reality. Want to explore tribal culture, honor through suffering and power? Maybe a redemption arc that really hits? Then orcs are the way to go. You could imagine their voices to be a little bit guttural and intense. And when they charge on the battlefield, you can imagine that scream would be somewhere between a Klingon battle charge and a Viking war cry. Every single growl should feel like it's costing them something. But let's talk strategy, getting the most of these monsters on the table. Hobgoblins are gonna shine when they're in a smart fight. You can think formations, controlled attacks, controlled retreats. Not necessarily a brawler, a soldier. So run them like it. Use waves of frontline fighters, archers on the back, so maybe some blasting casters to the rear. Don't be afraid to have your front line hold the line or the back line retreat when it's broken. And infiltrating a hobgoblin camp could be something that your players talk about for years. They could have things like alarm systems, rotating guards, and bonus points if your players can take out the commander to truly embody cut off the head and the body falls with it. Because when you take out the commander, does that break the morale and they flee? Or does it start a last stand? But orcs are the sledgehammer to a goblin's scalpel. They can quickly get to the front lines and overwhelm archers and casters. But if you were gonna have a warband of orcs, don't just have it be normal orcs, throw in like an Eye of Grumash for some divine chaos. Or you could even pair them with things like wolves, ogres, or like a crude siege engine that the party has to focus on to take down. Bottom line, hobgoblins make players think, orc make players sweat. So without further ado, let's get into the battle. The battlefield is a rocky clearing at the edge of a pine forest. Low hills, scattered boulders, and the tension of an impending clash hanging in the air. From the west, the orc charges into view, bare-chested, great axe in hand, muscles rippling, eyes blazing with fury. Thick javelins hang from a crude sling across his back, and he spots his prey. A hobgoblin steps forward with measured precision from the east, clad in scale mail and gripping a longbow. He doesn't roar, he doesn't run. He sizes up the charging brute with cold calculation and knocks an arrow. The orc hurls a javelin, and it clatters off of the hobgoblin's shield. The hobgoblin fires back. His arrow catches the orc in the thigh. The orc grunts, but doesn't slow. Another javelin sails wide. The hobgoblin retreats uphill, losing a second arrow. This one digs into the orc's shoulder. Blood sprays. Still the orc barrels forward, now within 40 feet. The hobgoblin fires again, but the shot glances off of the bone. The orc roars, "Grumash!" and throws his final javelin. It punches through the hobgoblin's side, forcing him to stagger. But it's not enough. The orc reaches the final stretch, axe raised high, and the hobgoblin drops the bow, draws his long sword, and braces behind his shield. Steel meets fury. The orc swings wild and rugged, carving shallow cuts through the hobgoblin's defenses. But the hobgoblin fights with precision. The orc scores a brutal slash across the hobgoblin's chest, but in that moment, the hobgoblin ducks low, drives his blade into the orc's side, and twists. The orc stumbles back, blood pouring from the wound. He snarls and tries for one last desperate charge, but the hobgoblin sidesteps and delivers a clean final blow to the back, sending the orc to the ground. The orc growls, defiant to the end, then falls silent. So let's talk hypotheticals. Orc versus hobgoblin, mano a mano. On paper, the hobgoblin has the edge with a higher armor class, a much higher armor class. They're built to survive and strike smart. Even though they can't use their ability in this solo match, it does not hinder them as much as you might think. The orc is going to be coming in hot with the aggressive ability, and if they didn't have that specific ability, they wouldn't even made it to the hobgoblin. But one good hit with the axe and the hobgoblin is hurting. If it's a critical hit, it's an instant death. But without the element of surprise or proper backup, the orc's much lower AC means it's going to take too many hits, more than it can afford. Unless the orc gets lucky, which is totally possible, this is a classic Fury versus Finesse, and Finesse usually wins. So who's taking the title? Let's break it down. Tactical threat, hobgoblins all the way. Their synergy, coordination, and battlefield control make them deadly in numbers. Ease of use in a story? That one is definitely going to be going to the orcs. A warband of orcs can show up anywhere thanks to their nomadic nature. But what's the most fun to face? Well, that one's up to you. So who do you think is the winner of this beast battle? Leave that down in the comments below, and please leave a suggestion for the next two monsters we leave in a mashup. But thank you so much for watching, everybody, and until next time, we'll see you all later.